Welcome to Hines on Air, from Atlanta to the world, hosted by Matt Hines. Are you ready?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Hines on Air. It is good to have you with us. I tell you what, in this day and age, the American public is getting exposed to a lot of courtroom drama and a lot of legal procedure, and they just hear a lot about courtrooms and trial tactics and stuff because of everything that's happening with Trump. Well, today we have a very special guest on air with us. This is Miss Rachel Larimore. She's a spectacular criminal defense attorney. Right now, she's working in Georgia. She's got a lot of exciting stories. So I want to welcome Rachel to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
All right. You're welcome. All right. So how long have you been involved in criminal defense?
So criminal defense, I started out, I got my first taste back in 2018.
Okay.
I was an intern on a major case that happened. It was a federal case.
Yeah.
It occurred in the Northern District in Georgia, and that was the Nat Hardwick case.
Nat Hardwick.
So I don't know if, a lot of people truly knew about that case, because it, involved the real estate market, and he was a prominent figure, especially in the legal community in Georgia. That was my first real taste of the criminal justice system, how it operates, how it works, and it, it's made me want to go into criminal law.
That's cool. See, I remember because I started out in real estate, and back then Morris, Hardwick, and Snyder were the big dogs.
Right.
They were the godfathers of all real estate closings. They had a lot of business. They made a lot of money. They had offices everywhere, and sort of everybody looked up to them. So when we say Morris, Hardwick, and Snyder, the Hardwick in that partnership is what we're talking about, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so what was that case about?
So he allegedly was accused of embezzling from his law firm, and ultimately the firm went bankrupt. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison.
Okay, so he went to trial and he was found guilty.
Yes.
So I'm sure that, how long did the trial last? You remember?
It was, I believe, a little over a month total.
Okay.
From start to finish.
And y'all were defending?
Yeah. The lawyer that I interned for was defending him.
Did he take the stand?
Case. He did.
How do you decide? Because there's always, we've got this constitutional protection that the defendant does not have to testify at their own trial, does not have to give evidence against himself. Do you have sort of an approach to that you're going through when a trial comes up? Should I put my witness up or should I not let him testify?
Right, and me and Fritz were confronted with this issue recently when we went down to Ware County on the murder case of, having our client or asking him, if he would like to testify. I think there's a misconception, right? I know that it can't be used against him at trial. So if you exercise your right not to testify, the jurors cannot take that as any way indicative of your guilt.
You think they do that?
I think that they do.
So you think they respect that?
I think that
instruction?
Although they're instructed not to, I think in the back of their heads, they somehow think, okay, well, he has to be guilty. Why is he not giving his side of the story?
Right.
And I think, in order to resonate with jurors, they want to hear the defendant's side of the story.
I would imagine. Yeah.
So it's really, it's all about narrative. It's all about, storytelling, and they want to hear both sides of the story. And when a defendant, exercises right, although he has a constitutional right, I think they take that into consideration.
Against the defendant. Right. Okay. So Nate testified.
Yes. He did.
Okay. All right.
I worked very closely with him, and I've worked very closely with the attorney. And I actually wrote a paper when I was in law school. We had to, I think it was for some legal writing class that I had to take. And basically, I wrote it obviously about criminal law. I've been studying it my whole life. And I used him as, an example. And I think one of the things that still I think about to this day that he said to me is the rights that you think you have, they really don't exist. And ever since then, it's just made me, I don't know, want to fight and want to go in and fight for clients and, basically protect them and help them in any way that I can.
When he says the rights that he thought he had, do you know what he was talking about? Like what happened at trial that he thought was unfair? Do you remember?
I think that, what he's talking about is, you have, the right, like we were talking about, the right not to testify. Mm-hmm. But however, there's a caveat to it, right? So, yeah, you have all these constitutional protections, but at the same time, if you exercise them, even though you're instructed that they won't be used against you, they end up being used against you.
I gotcha. Yeah. So you think, just from a broader perspective, do you think the process is fair? Or do you think sometimes it's the defendants have a disadvantage when they go to court?
I think they always have a disadvantage when you look at federal cases. The prosecution, the team, they have a over 90% win rate. Why is that? They have unlimited resources. Defendants don't.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge disadvantage. That's a huge unfairness. I mean, hiring private counsel or public defender, we don't have access to the resources that the state or the federal government has.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seemed to see, I didn't talk to the jury in these cases, but when I've seen the facts and the presentations and seen their decision, to me, the jury saw a situation, assumed that, well, they must be guilty, so we might as well go ahead and punish them. Right. But they didn't really factor in beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. And they didn't factor in all these instructions from the judge that, to me, would have made a difference.
Right.
I agree with you. I think there's an unfairness, too, against the defendant.
Yeah, and too, we can instruct, we can propose jury instructions and write jury instructions all day. Whether or not jurors actually adhere to them, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
So I totally think that, there's disadvantages for sure.
Yeah. We had a trafficking case over one time, and the lady was caught. She had sold to an undercover FBI agent. So it was hard to say she was completely innocent. But I remember I hired as co-counsel somebody who had lots of experience. I didn't have much experience at the time, but I wanted to help this lady. So I got this guy to come on board with me, and we tried the case. And I wasn't discouraged, but I was shocked at his viewpoint on it, because he was like, Matt, she's going to be convicted in this jurisdiction.
Right.
She's going to be convicted. Like, just go up there, do what you can. She's going to be convicted. And I was sad by like, no, man, don't think like that. Let's just go in with a fresh viewpoint here and fight like hell.
Right.
And I did. And unfortunately, she was found guilty. But I don't know. I was disappointed at the way it seemed to be. Like, they knew she did not stand a chance in that jurisdiction with this jury. Right. Kind of like what's going on with Trump in New York, because they say, well, this judge is after him, and there's no way anybody in New York is going to find him not guilty. And that's sad that he's not getting, whether he's guilty or not. It's sad that the outcome's determined by where he's at, where the courthouse is.
Right. And that's the thing that when I talk to clients, I always talk to them about, the jurisdiction of the case. You have to take that into account when you're considering, whether to, accept a plea offer or go to trial. You have to take that into account. Is it fair? Absolutely not. But at the same time, it is the reality. So you do take in, the juror pool of that jurisdiction, the judge in that jurisdiction, where you are. And it does play a major part at trial and in these cases.
Yeah, that's right. On the civil side, when we're having a lawsuit suing somebody, not on the criminal side, I know a lot of times the case will settle or not settle based on where we're going to end up filing the lawsuit. Because the insurance companies, they do more research than anybody. I mean, they've got mountains of data on all of the settlements and verdicts of all the courthouses and counties and everything. They know exactly what's going to happen. It's pretty remarkable. But it's that sort of predetermined. Like, the location matters.
Yeah, it does. For sure.
Yeah, cool. Well, all right. So that was your first introduction to criminal defense, was the Nate Hardwick case. Are there any others that are notable in your mind that stand out as this was pretty exciting? So
we actually was one that me and Fritz did. Frederick Mann.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when we say Fritz, we're talking about the legendary Frederick Mann. He was on like podcast 3 or 4 or 5 somewhere. Okay, so if you're listening and you hadn't heard that one, go back and listen to Frederick Mann. He's amazing. But, okay, please.
He is a well-seasoned veteran. Yes. He was a federal prosecutor. I think he's been doing this for 40 years. So he enlisted me, like he always does, to go with him to Ware County.
Okay.
And we had a murder case that lasted a week down in Ware County.
In Ware County, we're talking about South Georgia.
We're talking Waycross, Georgia.
Waycross, Georgia. That's right near the Florida line. Yeah. Okay. All right.
5 hours from here is quite the haul, but yeah, it was an exciting trial. Client ended up getting, convicted. But it was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener to the injustice that, happens in our system.
Can you tell us some facts of that case?
Yeah, so he was charged with, it was a self-defense case.
Okay.
He was charged with malice murder.
Malice murder means that he intended to kill somebody, and that happened.
Yeah,
that's what he's charged with. I'm not saying that's what he did.
It's not necessarily that it was premeditated, but it was, essentially, it can happen a couple ways. It can be depraved heart, like extreme criminal, like negligence or recklessness.
What's depraved heart mean?
So meaning it was extreme, like recklessness.
Okay, so not like...
You could be charged with murder, like let's say I go into a bar, right? And I shoot a gun up in the air. I'm not aiming at anybody. I'm not pointing at anybody, but I shoot the gun up in the air and a bullet falls down on somebody and kills them.
Uh-huh.
In Georgia, I can be charged with murder.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's depraved heart.
Okay.
It's not necessarily premeditation or intent, but he was charged with malice murder. He ultimately, and among other counts, that it was a while ago, so I can't remember the other counts, but he was ultimately convicted of malice murder.
Do you remember the circumstances? Because I know you said it was a self-defense case.
Right.
So meaning somebody attacked him.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Do you recall the facts, like what happened between him and the other guy?
So he was friends with this guy. The guy was allegedly involved in doing, some criminal activity. He was, a kid doing kid things that he shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
Making bad decisions.
This is the defendant, the guy that died, right?
Yeah.
Not the client, not your client. Okay.
Right. So I think his family had a history of, being involved in criminal activity. Our client, he was seeing the guy's sister on a romantic level. Mm-hmm. And so it was alleged that she was pregnant by our client. And the victim was her brother, and he found out about that. And our client went over to consult to ask his sister, was it true? Was it in fact true that she was pregnant? And he went over there, and they got into a heated, argument about it. There was a knife that was found at the scene that was wrapped in a towel. Our client alleged that essentially he came at him with the knife. And as a result, he had a gun, and, he shot in self-defense. That he was completely in fear for his life. The guy was a football player. I think he was a linebacker. I mean, he was huge. He was like 6 feet tall, like over, 280-something pounds. I mean, he was a big, strong guy. Yeah. And you saw he's probably 6 feet, and he weighed half that. So they got into a heated argument, and he shot in self-defense.
So there was allegations that the guy that died, right, that was twice your client's size, had attacked him, right? Was kind of pushing him up against somewhere. And
grabbed his shirt, and he was trying to turn around, and he was still holding on to him, mm-hmm, and he was coming at him with a knife, mm-hmm, and that's when, shots were fired.
And were there any witnesses?
There was his little brother, who has a cognitive disability. He was the only witness to the scene.
He saw everything?
He did not. He claimed that he didn't. He was, in the back, but that he heard everything. And he has a disability. He changed his story multiple times, but he was the only eyewitness to the scene.
So it's a tough situation, because when your client says, I was acting in self-defense,
right,
and the only other person to disagree with that is the little brother of the guy who died, but
right,
that little brother has changed his story and didn't see everything, right? And then we said, it wouldn't seem the police and the state have a whole lot of evidence against your client.
Right.
Yeah. But ultimately, he was found guilty.
He was found guilty, yes.
When y'all got to Ware County, did you feel you had a fair shake? Did you feel you had a fair trial?
Absolutely not.
No?
No.
Could you go into detail on that?
Yeah, I think that when you're from Atlanta and you go kind of into these smaller counties, they have the small, close-knit community, mindset, right? I mean, and that's in any county. Like my grandmother grew up in Grove Hill, Alabama. You probably never heard of it in your life. It's incredibly small. It's a close-knit community. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody knows all the DAs. Everybody knows all the defense lawyers. Everybody knows everybody, essentially. And, when you go into these small counties, it's that close-knit community mindset. They don't really know us, and we don't really know them.
Right.
And so, they sometimes take it out on the other side and, as far as, just kind of being kind of hostile towards us. And that was totally how I felt it went.
I know I'm familiar with the case. And what shocked me, I know there was something filed called a motion in limine.
Right.
If you're in law, you know what that means. If you're not, basically that means that you're asking for evidence to be admitted or not be admitted.
Right.
And y'all had won a motion in limine. Y'all had kept out a text message from the defendant, right? And you got a different judge for the trial, didn't you? Or not?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the judge you had created a relationship with, who had been working together all the time, I think who liked you and Fritz, was changed.
Yes.
And then the new judge comes in and allows that text message that the other judge had kept out.
Right.
And it's amazing because in my experience, trials hinge on little decisions like that.
Right.
You can prep for freaking months.
Yeah.
That's right. You can prep, interview and prep your witnesses, get all your evidence lined up, create beautiful trial notebooks, but little changes like that affect the outcome in a major way. Yep. Anyway, that's disappointing. But I don't know, right now it's on appeal, correct?
It is, yeah. They have started the appeal process. We also filed a motion for new trial, so that's in the works as well. And
you got to meet our client, I assume, a good bit. Okay. Yep. What'd you think of the guy?
He's a good kid. Smart kid. He's never been in trouble. No criminal history. Bad place, bad time.
Yeah.
And, he was in school. He had aspirations and goals in life and, essentially wanted to go to college, and it's unfortunate. It's very, very hard. I think, you try in this business to set your emotions aside.
Yeah.
But sometimes, we're human at the end of the day. And, I remember after that trial was done, I believe, I cried, for a good day. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to see this, but, as time goes on, it's just, not to sound callous, but it's something you grow accustomed to.
Yeah.
And it's just the way the system is, and it's unfortunate.
Yep. Yeah, that's a tough one. That you're exactly right. I know we look at the defendant and realize he's got to sit in jail. Now maybe he'll win that appeal. It sounds like he's got some pretty good arguments to have it changed or a new trial or something. Yep. But you're right. The toll on the attorney or the other people involved is enormous.
Yeah.
I know his poor old parents are suffering right now, but yeah, I know. All right. Well, any other stories you can share with us?
I've always got tons of stories.
Yeah.
Those are the biggest stories right now as far as, criminal trials coming up. I actually have trial next week.
Do you?
I'm set to go for, so we'll see. Down in DeKalb County.
Down in DeKalb.
Love me down there.
That's where, okay, so speaking of DeKalb County, you were solicitor there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And solicitor, for everybody who doesn't know, that is the government's attorney. So Rachel here's prosecutor. So
batting both sides.
That's right. But there's strategies, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine that makes you more effective.
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
So it's definitely helped. And that was really my first legal experience as an attorney, was down in DeKalb County. Actually, my partner is a prosecutor down in DeKalb County.
Okay.
So we have totally different views on the criminal justice system.
Is he is he like staunchly pro-government, or does he like understand?
He likes to appear that way. He wants everybody to think he's, big, bad, tough, prosecutor. And he's really reasonable.
That's good. He seems,
at the end of the day, he is definitely one of the more reasonable, as far as, prosecutors. He's not 100%, tough on crime.
That's good. I'm glad we have people like that out there, because it's tough to deal with somebody, because it's like we've been discussing. You never know what a jury's going to do.
Right.
And I think Chris Cuomo was on Patrick Bet-David the other day, and he had said, "Look, you can indict a ham sandwich."
You can.
I mean, indict it. Is nothing
to it,
and that basically allows the prosecution to move forward with going after the person. So, it's risky to go to trial. If we have a client, or you have a client, and they're getting offered, well, we'll give you go to jail for 10 years, but the max could be 20 years, and you think, well, that's ridiculous. They shouldn't go to jail for 10 years, maybe 2, but 10's too much. But the truth is, you don't know what a jury's going to do.
Right.
And
that's one of the things, I have that conversation. It's a hard conversation to have with clients. I ask them, to me, it's a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
You got to look at the risk involved.
Yeah.
And you got to look at what you're facing. Okay, yes, there's a chance that you can get a not guilty verdict. But the reality, depending on the jurisdiction where you are, the evidence they have against you, you have to consider all that when making a decision. Is it something that you're willing to risk?
Right.
20 years versus 10.
That's right.
20 years versus 5.
Yeah.
If we have a client that is facing life with or without the possibility of parole, hell yeah, go for it.
Right.
On those,
no choice.
You have to lose at that point, especially if the prosecutor's not willing to negotiate and come down and come to a resolution on it.
Yeah.
But if you have a prosecutor offering, let's say 10 years and the max is 30, you really need to consider that offer.
And it's a shame too, because we have to decide whether the client should plead guilty or not based on their innocence, but based on, will a jury find them guilty?
Right.
Which is a different thing. It's a different standard.
Right.
So,
and that's the thing too. At the end of the day, the choice to play is the clients. It's solely the clients. All we can do as lawyers is advise them of their options and what the consequences are.
Right.
Whether which route they decide to go on. But it's something that they hold that power. And it's something I try to make clear to them. Here's the risk. It's up to you.
Yeah.
I'll work for you. You tell me what you want to do.
Right.
At the end of the day. So it's tough out here in the criminal world.
That's right. It is. Well, listen, I'm glad they have people like you fighting for them. So thank you for all that you do.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. You are very welcome. All right, everybody. This has been another Hines on Air. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, if you have not, please subscribe to the show. Follow us on YouTube, and we'll see you at the next Hines on Air.
This was Hines on Air, recorded from the Hines Production Studio in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Don't forget that you can follow us on YouTube to watch and listen to the podcast.